Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, baby metal fan, and today we have something a little bit special. Um, I've been following a channel called The First Take for quite some time. If you're familiar with some of my old videos, you may have seen me refer to other artists appearing on The First Take, in which you basically stand up in front of a microphone and sing, and you get one shot, and there's no edits and no redos. At least that's the advertised principle. And I was always kind of curious to see how a band like Baby Metal would handle that format. But to be honest, I didn't ever think it would happen. And then yesterday, out of the blue, we got this announcement from The First Take that Baby Metal were going to be on this morning. And there was a tiny little teaser with a little bit of piano intro, which didn't really cue anybody precisely as to what the song was going to be. So I was super excited, and I figured what I would do today is a sort of hot take, part reaction, part mini discussion. And what I'll do is I'll pull the thing up and I'll watch it and record myself, and then I will go back through it, talk about it, and insert those things into the original recording. Partly because if I try to sort of do a reaction to the whole thing, there's no way it'll get past the copyright bots. It'll just get blocked. So I'll cut it up into little pieces and talk my way through it. If I have anything to say, we shall see. I will say it's amazing how much noise those costumes make, you know, and it gives you a really good idea of just how live this sound is, right? This is what this channel does. It's supposed to be all about the vocals and the microphone setup, and you have to be really still. And sometimes on this channel, you'll get more sort of not behind the scenes exactly, but you'll get a little preamble and a little tail out at the end where you see the performers sort of warming up vocally, telling everybody that they're ready to go, and sometimes they'll pass comment on the performance and thank everybody at the end. We didn't get that here because of course what we get is something very baby metal. We get them in costume, and it's absolutely a performance mode, right? We're not going to sort of get to see their persona. No, that's not true. What we are seeing is the persona, not the people behind the persona, right? That's what they do. I mean, the first thing that struck me, you know, when I first heard that piano teaser on the little Twitter announcement thing, that piano really sounds like the introduction to Forbidden Colors by Ryuichi Sakamoto and David Sylvian, the theme music for Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. I was you know, excited by the possibility that they might do a cover of that, because it's an extraordinary piece of music and would make a kind of sense for them. But obviously it's not, it's monochrome. But I think it's really striking that the musical accompaniment, you know, does not sound like the studio recording at all. That they're picking out quite different themes to create the sense of the music, and I do love this, and there have been times when I wished that Baby Metal did this kind of thing more often, where they reimagine a song for performance or for a special event, so that you hear it like you've never heard it before, right? There's something really cool about the idea of getting to listen to a song that you know and love, but being forced to hear it as if for the first time, because it's being sort of refashioned, and you can't just sing along, you know. So I like the fact that they've taken this slightly sort of stripped down, slowed down. Is it slower? It feels slower. Maybe it's not.
空を彩る七色の夢ずっとこのまま見ていたかった昨日まで輝いてたきら星でさえも I don't know what to say I don't know what to say 色あせてくから
And the vocals are just so clean. It's nice to see Moa involved. Obviously, she doesn't have a lot to do in this song, but it's good to see her there and to hear the sort of clarity of her voice too. It's deeper than I would have expected. She's singing in a slightly lower register than I might have thought she would. But Sue's vocals are just extraordinary. I think if we've got anything from the other one so far, it's the sense of her maturity as a singer and her evolution as a performer. And I think it's interesting that one of the recent interviews that Stephen produced, Funny Toss, who I had on a few weeks ago, in which she said a couple of really interesting things about this song. One of them was that she suggested it was recorded 5 years ago, the original studio version, which is a huge surprise, and suggests that they're sitting on really, really good stuff, which they chose not to use for Metal Galaxy, where it might have been slightly out of place and isn't doing the kind of genre meshing that album does. So it makes sense. But it's amazing that they would sit on a song this powerful. The other thing that she said, which I thought was really, really interesting, was that when she first encountered the song, she thought it quite light, quite upbeat, and she expressed surprise at the idea that the fan base had responded to it as a very serious song with a powerful message. And that's really interesting, because I mean, I find this song almost embarrassingly emotional. But I also think that when the song was released with the video, the visualizer, whatever you want to call it, a lot of people responded to the visuals rather than to the core content of the song, in terms of their interpretation. And I did too, right? I talked about Graveyard of Fireflies and the bombing of bombings generally. Some people really, really pushed the Hiroshima reading, which I get, but it never felt completely right to me, or at least not the only way of reading the song, because lyrically, it doesn't actually do that much with that stuff. Most of what we were getting was coming from the video. I think some of those images, the tree at the end and so on. So it's interesting because I think that the specificity of some of those readings is not right, you know. And that's not to say you can't read it that way or you can't interpret it that way. Of course you can. You can interpret it any way you want. But people who were insisting that that was the only way to read the song, I think that's where it's wrong, right? Because clearly that's not how she was thinking about it when she first recorded it. For her, this was clearly a sort of classic baby metal, positivity out of difficulty kind of song, you know. But that said, this is clearly not a light performance. So I wonder if her performance of it now has kind of changed in the light of the fan response. They seem to be embracing this more reflective, more introspective kind of presentation of the song, which I think is interesting too. Monochrome の花火なら僕 that's the first time that we hear another vocal in the background, right? A higher pitch, right? I was saying Moa's singing in a lower register. There's a higher choral vocal behind, which adds a layer of texture. It's very difficult to talk about the song because it just gets me. It would be much better if I was just an analyst and not a fan. Except that it wouldn't. There's that keyboard again. It's so Ryuichi Sakamoto. It really is. It makes me wonder if it's deliberate. It sounds so like that. I mean, if you haven't seen Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, you should absolutely see it. It's an extraordinary film with David Bowie and Beat Takeshi, and it's set in a Japanese prison camp during the war and follows the relationship of an English officer and the Japanese officer. And it's about, forbidden attraction, same-sex and across lines of hostility and war, and it's a really powerful thing. Given the fact that fans have been making these sort of Second World War connections to Monochrome, I wonder if there's some sort of conscious dialogue going on between those two pieces of music. I have to think about that. I don't know. I mean, I think it's potentially really interesting and rich, but maybe it's just me hearing it. And suddenly, our sort of imaginary chorus, assuming that these are the people actually producing the sound, appear. We get the three hooded figures, which are really interesting also because it seems to evoke an earlier version of Baby Metal. We've seen them wearing this kind of robes before when they were a three-piece, but also maybe anticipating the return of a third member next month, right? Actually, in a matter of weeks at this point, I assume. But yeah, it's interesting. Often in the first take videos, we'll see the piano accompaniment and any kind of other instrumental stuff. Here we're not seeing that. We never see who's playing the instruments. We don't know if they're live or recorded. Obviously there's a piano, but increasingly as the song progresses, we start to hear strings and almost a chamber orchestra, but we never see who's playing that. I'm assuming that the extra vocal that we're hearing is coming from these three figures whose faces we never see.
雨に降られて凍える夜は少しだけでもそばにいたかった明日まで感じていたいぬくもりでさえも You don't have to say, you don't have to say 冷めてしまうから
That little that little catch in her voice, that little switch. It's interesting that I don't think I hear that in the studio recording, and it does make sense. If that was recorded 5 years ago, and we're talking about how much more mature her voice is now, there's a richer emotional quality, I think, to the performances that we've heard most recently, and she's grown into her voice. The technical mastery is there, the clarity is there always, but now I think she's painting with a broader palette in terms of the tonality of her voice and the way that she conveys sentiment and emotion. And I do think, again, in that section that we just saw, and with Moa's response to it, this is a fairly serious song. So that sense of the lightness of the song I don't think we're playing that at all. I think they're embracing this more sort of reflective, melancholy kind of approach to the song. I love it.
あのモノクロームの花火なら僕らは
And obviously, you know, the joining of hands from the chorus group is classic baby metal, right? We've seen that in many, many videos from Ijime Dame Zettai Karate, and there's a sense of creating community out of individual difficulty and pain, and you survive it by coming together as a group. So that visual, I think, fits the tonality of the song too.
なくなろくの黄昏に僕らは何を見てる長い長い夜だってやがて朝は来るから
That swell, she lets the voice come down to do that sort of middle eight, and then it builds. You hear the rise in volume from the sustained note. This is not an easy song to sing, especially with all that instrumental underscoring going on, which is not simply carrying the melody, it's doing its own thing to create a sort of richer sound, but it means that the emphasis is all on her to maintain the main melody. That's the moment. You know, when you get that, when the sound drops out underneath, and she gets the bukudo up over the top, man. I said that in the original version, and you know the contrast is not as great here because in the studio version you've got that huge full electric metal kind of sound that suddenly drops out, and then it's just the sort of clarity of her voice carrying the song over the top. There's less of that here because we're dealing with a more acoustic set, but it still emphasizes the liveness and the immediacy of her vocal presence, right? There's nothing synthesized about this, so it feels like you're in her head, her heart. There's a little echo, a little sustain, reverb on the voice, but otherwise it's absolutely clean. And you hear there's a precision in the way that she's hitting these notes. You know, that there's none of that sort of sliding between notes, trying to sort of fumble your way through them to find them. It's absolutely crisp. She's going from, you know, comparatively low to comparatively high in a single move, absolutely nailing it each time. I mean, it's a flawless performance. Okay. Wow. Okay, so that's beautiful, exquisite, immaculately performed. A really interesting take on the song. I love this sort of hyper acoustic kind of framing of it. Okay, all right, so now I'm gonna rewatch it, break it up, and talk so I can insert that in. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. Should have a little kitsune sign at the end, but we don't. And then the clothes as they walk off. Man, it's so good. It's so good. I wonder if they did another song. Sometimes bands on first take will record 2 songs at a time. We can but hope. It's just exquisite. You know, somebody, while I was in the process of this, I got a message saying, oh, you know, I saw it and it moved me to tears. And I'm like, you know, if it didn't, you might be dead. If that doesn't stir anything in you, yeah, you're a lost cause. All right, that's it. I'm not going to. I got nothing else to say. I really wanted them to do this show. They did it, and it was perfect. You know, flawless. I love this. I really don't know what else to say. I am spent. Okay, so I'll stop. So as ever, I'll probably rush this up just in the interest of time. I haven't done my light and darkness video yet, but I'll have to get to that soon. And I will talk to you soon. In the meantime, like, comment, subscribe, check out my Patreon page, buy a book. Make yourself a baby metal cocktail or merchandise. I got shirts and everything. Yeah, very exciting. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, bye.